although 94 was great, I think it was the culmination of the beginning of soccer being back on the map, right? It was 89 through 94, and it was great, and it was exciting. And now we need to play with the big boys.
Greetings, folks, and welcome to Inside American Soccer with Tab Ramos and Tom Bogert. I, of course, am not Tom Bogert. I'm Matt Doyle, filling in for Tom for the next couple of weeks as he's on baby duty for a little while longer with his new son, Theo, who I'm told is already holding a hockey stick. Tab, we might have lost one to hockey already, man. Like, I thought he was going to be a future soccer player. Tab, of course, is one of the great soccer players in U.S. history, three-time World Cup veteran, original member of the Metro Stars. And are you planning to recruit young Theo Bogert back to the fold, get him onto the pitch instead of at the ring?
I think there's time. I think grabbing the hockey. I mean, who didn't grab a hockey stick this weekend? Really, obviously we're rooting for the USA.
Right.
Got a big win, first one in however many decades, right? Since the miracle, right?
Since 80.
Yep. So we were all happy about that. We're all rooting, and I think it's really nice that he grabbed the hockey stick. And then, let's just give him a week, and about a week from now, it's time to put the hockey stick down and get back to the soccer ball already for Theo.
Yeah, hopefully there'll be some grass to play on, though it's all buried under 2 feet of snow in New Jersey and all the parts in the Northeast where we both are. I thought it was great in that hockey game that the U.S. won by bunker and countering. It gave me some flashbacks. If you watched the 2 minutes that was the entirety of overtime, it was 3v3, and it was just like one break after another by the Canadians until the U.S. stopped one and just countered in the other direction. Like, it felt like watching some of you guys in the 1990s because there were so many games where you guys had to just absorb and then
That's right. I think they went with long ball, which I had not seen in hockey. So it was very effective. They went route one. I think the Americans have one of the older English coaches, I believe. I don't know much about hockey, but it was effective. And at the end of the day, as always, what matters in sports is to score one more than the other team. And that's what it's about. And that's what they did. So congrats.
That is the most important data. Yeah. Congrats to them. It is, of course, awesome to watch international competition in basically any sport. I'm a sucker for the Olympics. We're both suckers for the World Cup, which is coming this summer. And the whole point of this show is try to tease apart what's happening with U.S. soccer and who has the inside track on spots and what we'll see from Mauricio Pochettino's tactics and what the chances are for the U.S. to have a moment in soccer like the U.S. just had in hockey. It feels like a long shot, but crazy things have happened in this world of ours. And on this show of ours, we'll be discussing the latest news around the national team, including Josh Sargent with a big move. Balogun, who we talked about last week, was in a bit of a goal-scoring slump. He hurt us, Tab. He has had a very good week over in France. Ricardo Pepi back on the field, scoring a beauty of a goal. Tyler Adams back as well. We're also going to have a new segment where we rank all things U.S. men's national team. And this week, with the start of the MLS season, we'll rank the top 5 MLS players who need to impress Mauricio Pochettino. And it's actually harder than it sounds like because Poch has been very open to bringing in MLS guys and using them in crucial spots, including over some European-based counterparts. And so it's a long list. Like, I could go 10 deep on MLS guys who need to impress Poch for various reasons. And, of course, we will go inside the locker room with Tab and talk about the 95 team. Everybody focuses on 94 and how that changed American soccer. But don't forget about what happened in the aftermath when you took all the glory and all the accomplishments of 94 and spun it into something really professional. I'm looking forward to hearing those stories from Tab. And I think it's one that is important for our listenership because I don't think everybody knows about them. But first, let's start with the U.S. national team news. Let's start with Josh Sargent, Tab. He signed with Toronto FC this week. Tom reported, of course. Congrats on Tom for another big scoop. $22 million move with the incentives that could bring it up to about 26 or 27 million. I think he has been in season, though he has not been playing for a while. He has been training. Toronto FC badly need the help. Like, how fast do we think this gets done for him to get over here and get, like, if you were coaching, would you just put him in the 11 next week if he's good to go?
Yeah, well, first of all, obviously, always Tom is always reporting first. So I can see, I'm trying to picture Tom at home with a baby in one hand, one arm, and the phone on the other, right? I would imagine that's what Tom looks like every day. But yeah, the Josh situation is obviously took a while. It's been a month, over a month now since Josh has played, because he's been out. He was sort of, left aside by the coach there, which obviously the coach has his right. If a player is not happy, he doesn't want to have unhappy player on the field, or sometimes even in training. Right, you want to have positivity there, as in particular in the situation that Norwich's been in, which is battle week to week to avoid that relegation. Right, so now Josh finds himself in Toronto. I think it's obviously a good move for him, because that's what he wanted. So we would assume he's going to be happy there, and that he's happy to be back in MLS. In terms of the coaching side, and do you put him in? I mean, I think Josh, played most of the season at Norwich. He has been training. Let's not forget MLS has just played one game so far. So I can't imagine that where there would be a way where Josh is further behind than really MLS players at this point. So if I were to be coaching Josh at this point, I would put him in. He's a number 9. He's ready to go. He knows his job. And, with a week of training, he should be ready to go. So I expect them to see him right away.
Yeah, I think his biggest strength as a number 9 is his ability to combine with the rest of the attackers. And that's something that we saw throughout his career. I mean, I remember watching him with the 20s when you were the head coach, and his ability to bring the other attackers into the play and then create something out of that as a group. And that's something that Toronto desperately need. They did score 2 goals this weekend, but both of them were just very direct off of turnovers, a bad rebound on one of them from the Dallas goalkeeper. It wasn't stuff that they were sort of creating as a unit. Josh Sargent's ability to help teams create as a unit is his greatest strength as a center forward. And it's something that kind of ties a team together. And we saw that with him with the 20s back in 2019, when he was such a big part of that team, playing up an age level, right? He was 17, and you still brought him to that.
Yeah, he actually played the under-20 World Cup before he played the under-17 World Cup. So he went backwards on that one, just to get, John Hackworth and I had a number of conversations about that. But it was the right thing, and I think you framed it correctly. I would simplify that by just saying Josh is a soccer player. He really is. He's a number 9, but he's not just your box 9. He is a soccer player, so he makes the team better. That's why I had no issues at all in moving him up 2 or 3 age groups right away, because I felt like he really understands the game well. And for me, one of my favorite forwards that I had through my 8 or 10 years on the youth national teams.
Yeah, he really has that gift of like you said, being a soccer player and not just a box 9, like being able to make something more functional on a collective level. It hasn't translated for the U.S. national team. Like, that is not the version of Josh that we've seen. I think people have focused rightly on the fact that he hasn't been a goal scorer for the national team. He hasn't scored since 2019. Why? Do you have any, having watched all of it, can you pinpoint anything in particular as to why it hasn't worked for this kid who is obviously so talented?
Well, obviously, we can say all the way back to, 2019, but it's really not that many games that he played in the process, right? And not that many times where he was actually a starter and got the full game. having said that, we did watch Josh miss a couple of important chances with the national team, and that, with a forward, sometimes you get very limited opportunities. And let's not forget that the number 9 position has been one which has been very competitive for the last 5 or 6 years too. So we've been looking for that 9 that kind of takes over. And if you can recall, it was only about 6 months ago when we all started to say, okay, well, we think Balogun is the guy, right? So it's been 5 or 6 years of not actually having the guy. And because of that, anytime a forward would make a mistake, it would sort of set him back to being third now. And now you got to build yourself up again to get another chance. What I can tell you is this: Josh is a good player. Josh could help the national team today if he had an opportunity. But of course, he hasn't been played now for a little while. I think if he can get some consistency in Toronto, I think he could be back in the fold, and why not?
Yeah, and Toronto need him to live up to that. They need him to be great in MLS. He can't just be very good. He needs to be great, one of the best center forwards in the league. That's what he's being paid like. $22 million is a very, very big number for an MLS team, for any team really, for a transfer. But he's in the prime of his career. Family reasons, one of the big reasons he wanted to come back to North America. I was almost about to say the United States, but no, Toronto's Canada, but wanted to come back to North America. And here he is, and he's got it all in front of him and a lot to prove. He's been really, really good for Norwich. He had Bundesliga interest. He's obviously a really talented guy, but the hope is that his best years are ahead of him because the guys in front of him on the depth chart for the number 9 for the U.S. We saw what Flo Balogun did this week: 3 goals, 2 of them against PSG. He has laid down a marker for club and for country. He's going to be a hard man to catch. The number 1 guy at D-mid, I think on everybody's depth chart for the U.S. national team, is Tyler Adams. That always comes with an asterisk. It always comes with a caveat: if healthy. Tyler Adams, if healthy, is the clear choice to be the starting defensive midfielder. It is just a massive load-bearing if. And the good news to have this week, Tyler Adams returned to action for Bournemouth. Were you concerned about his recovery, and do you feel better now? And what's your confidence level going forward in his ability physically to stay where he needs to stay?
Well, first, it's a little bit alarming when players continue to get hurt, right? At the same time, I think this latest injury was more unlucky than anything else. To be fair, it's not like it's your normal player. I remember towards the end of my career, I kept getting muscular injuries, right? So once you start to get hurt and you get muscular injuries, it's almost like, man, there's just no turning back. There's always something. I think in this case, it's not one of those. I think it was unfortunate this time that he got hurt. And I think we mentioned it on this show that they said, well, it's going to be, 2 to 3 months, likely March. And we said, if anything, okay, if they said March, Tyler Adams will probably be back in February, which is exactly what happened, right? He's a hard worker. He will beat the expectations in terms of work required and then getting onto the field. And he did that. And by the way, jumping into the EPL cannot be easy. He played, I think, 60 or 70 minutes. And he did well. He looked like he belonged, and he was ready for that level, which is not easy. So yeah. Am I concerned about the World Cup? I'm always a little bit concerned with Tyler because of the history of the last few years, but not necessarily because of this injury. I think he'll put it behind him.
One of the big concerns for me with Tyler is if he does get injured, it changes the way the U.S. have to play, because nobody in the pool, few players in the world, man, match what he brings as a front foot defender. He reads those moments so quickly, and we think about it as defensively being, lines of banks of 4 and, put pressure on this pass, force that wide, get, cause a turnover over here. But what Tyler is best at is those those Red Bull moments, right? Those energy drink soccer moments where he reads the incipient turnover or chance to cause a turnover before anybody else, and he blows up one counterattack after another. Without him in there, it's a cascade effect because nobody else in the pool is anywhere close to as good as Tyler Adams about those moments that not only stop an opposing potential counterattack, but also have a way of creating chances for the U.S. if you're forcing a high turnover like that.
Well, let me put tactics aside a little bit on this one because the player I'm going to say that's the closest to Tyler Adams when it comes to that type of playing is Weston McKennie. If I had to pick one player who's always front foot, trying to win the ball, going for every tackle that he's going to win, and the ones he's likely not going to win, I think Weston is the closest thing. But Weston has not really played that defensive midfielder role, right? He's been wide for Juventus. He's been the 10 for Juventus. He's been a withdrawn 9. He's been and everything in between there, but not that role. So that's why I said, let me leave tactics aside. I was just thinking, if I think only about the mentality of the player, the closest to have the mentality that Tyler has is Weston. To me, that's the closest. Now, let's say Tyler goes down. I don't think Pochettino necessarily goes to someone who hasn't been playing there in that position. So now that opens the door to guys like Johnny Cardozo, who's maybe a little bit closer to just being a stay home, although at Atletico Madrid, he steps forward a little bit more. He can't do that role. And the reason I'm saying that is because although he's another player who has not done well with the national team, he did it at Real Betis last year, the whole year, and he did it really well. That holding in front of the back four, winning the ball and playing it and not losing it and doing it in La Liga, which is not easy. And that's the reason why Atletico Madrid bought him. Now, from the average American fan, we haven't seen that. But I think that would likely be the closest thing to someone holding that position. But from a mentality standpoint, I think Weston is really the only one that comes close to Tyler Adams.
Yeah, all right. So let's turn back to the center forwards. We mentioned it at the top. Flo Balogun had 3 goals this week across 2 games and 2 different competitions. And Ricardo Pepi returned and scored a gorgeous goal for PSV. That was good to see because that return was a little bit ahead of schedule. I think he wasn't supposed to be back until March as well. I think it's time to just say, all right, what's your current number 9 depth chart? What does it look like for you, Tom?
It hasn't changed for me because even last week, I think when we saw Ajiman score and we saw Haji Wright score, I think it was 3-1 game, right? We're all thinking, okay, you're going to be battling. But we did say on this show, Balogun is playing against the best defenders in the world and the toughest, competition in the world, which is the Champions League. His club is very competitive and at the top of Ligue 1 in France. So you have to take into consideration the competition. And then Balogun goes out and scores 2 goals in the Champions League and adds another one on the weekend in the league. So I think at this point, I think it's pretty clear who we have as a number 9, and that's Balogun, and everybody else is really fighting for 2 and 3.
Yeah, and I'll say everybody else for me right now is still Pat Ajiman, number 2. And I think there's not just goal-scoring reasons for that, but there's tactical reasons. In the way that teams press now, teams have, over the past 3 years, gone back to almost strictly man-oriented pressing. So there's been an uptick in playing long, especially in the international game. There's plenty of data to show it. And so you need to have sometimes a center forward who can just manhandle opposing center backs and win that first ball. And there's nobody in the pool who is better at that than Pat Ajiman. The rest of his game needs plenty of work. I don't think there's any chance of him usurping Flo Balogun as number 1. But I think just because he brings an elite trait that is so salient in the modern game, I think he's the clear number 2. And then for number 3, for me, it's still Haji Wright. Pepi, I was really happy to see him back. I think he's a more natural goal scorer, really a more natural number 9 than Haji Wright. I need to see him do it against better competition. I need to see him do it against Ajax. I need to see him do it against Feyenoord. I need to see him do it more consistently in the Champions League and international competition. And he's had some moments of like that a couple of years ago, but it hasn't been consistent. And the other thing is I need to see him go 90. This guy's only gone 90 a dozen times in the past 3 years. So the talent is there. The opportunity is there. Hopefully the health will be there. And then if the goals start coming on top of that, he can climb those charts. But for me, still, Ricardo Pepi is number 4 on the center forward depth chart. Everybody else, including Josh Sargent, behind those guys trying to catch up. And for us, it's time for a break. We'll be right back with our first Inside Rankings segment. This week, it's top 5 MLS players who need to impress Pochettino right now. Please rate, review, and subscribe to Inside American Soccer with Tom Bogert and Tab Ramos, wherever you get your podcasts. Welcome back to Inside American Soccer. Tab had a great idea for a new segment called Inside Rankings, where we rank our top 5 for all things U.S. men's national team related. So this week, in honor of First Kick, the start of the MLS season, we've got the top 5 MLS players who need to impress Mauricio Pochettino right now. And Tab, I'm going to grab the ball. I'm going to kick us off. For me, believe it or not, it's Matt Freese. And it's for a different reason than I think most people would consider for these top 5 lists. Matt Freese, I think, if he plays well over the next month and into March camp, he can shut the door. It's his job. If he continues to play like he did the second half of last year when he won the job for the national team and when he was excellent for NYCFC, there's no more discussion about who's starting in goal this summer for the U.S. national team.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good call. I would disagree that, if this is someone who needs to impress, looking to impress, I would say that if Matt Freese goes on cruise control between now and the World Cup, and has sort of average games, I think the position is really his to lose. I don't think Matt, with as well as he's played for the national team, and the consistency that he's had over the last 10, 12 games in which he started, I don't think he's going to lose that position unless he makes some big mistakes. So I like that you choose him as your number 5, but I think he's got his position pretty well locked.
Yeah, I think so too. But I'd like to see him shut the door. I'd like to see. I would like to just feel really, really good about what's happening in goal, and we're getting there. I don't think we're quite there yet. We're not there on the back line. And that brings us to your number 5.
So my number 5 is one that you can certainly argue with. And the reason I will say that is because a little bit like Matt Freese, this is someone who needs to be on cruise control between now and the end of the year. And this is Tim Ream for me. The first day, the MLS has only had one game so far. And I didn't think it was a great one for Tim, to be fair. And I wish I could tell you it was a one-off, but this is what I saw at the end of the year, last year too, in MLS for Tim Ream. I think Tim Ream, although I believe sort of like maybe like Roldan and to a certain extent, a player I'll name later, I think Pochettino is going to pick them anyway. But I do think that at some point, we have to think about his position at Charlotte, because what happens if Tim Ream all of a sudden doesn't start at Charlotte? What does that do? Right? But because and by the way, I love Tim Ream. He's a great guy. He's been an all-time national team player that represents the crest so well. All of those things, right? But I'm looking purely at the soccer part. I mean, there could be a possibility that at some point, if Tim Ream doesn't really go on a solid cruise control where he's playing well, I think he could lose his spot in Charlotte. And if he does, what happens next?
What we saw this weekend and down the stretch, and specifically then in the playoff series against NYCFC when Charlotte were eliminated, Father Time has caught up to him in terms of his speed. He is just not able to stay with most attackers in the open field. And Simon Betcher this past weekend looked like Kylian Mbappe at times, man, just sort of blowing by Tim Ream. And to me, Ream is still the best ball-playing center back in the pool by a mile. Just got the classiest left foot. He reads the game well, but physically, it's a question of whether or not he can keep up. And I think, like you, I think he'll be there anyway. I will be scared if Tim Ream is a starter for the national team this summer. I'm going to say it. I would not be scared if Christian Roldan was starting for the U.S. national team this summer. That's my number 4 pick. When we were talking about Tyler Adams before, Roldan is the guy I was thinking of who was closest to Tyler Adams in terms of defending on the front foot, creating those turnovers. And then he's also so good at tilting the field, right? He reads the game really quickly and is able to dump balls into channels or hit those third line passes to feet into the half spaces. He's the only field player to have played in all 6 games during that great stretch last autumn for the U.S. national team. And look, you could just tell how much Mauricio Pochettino loves him, and you could tell how much the players around him for both club and country love him. I think Christian Roldan over the next month has a chance to claim for his own that backup spot to Tyler Adams. And given Tyler's health issues, man, that might as well be a starting spot. So Christian Roldan, very high on my list of guys who need to continue to impress Mauricio Pochettino.
This is a good call, and I think he probably doesn't need to do a lot to impress Pochettino because of all of those things that you just mentioned, and above everything else, the value that he has to the group in general. He's very well liked. He brings guys together. He allows the team to be better. He makes the team better on and off the field, and he has huge value. And besides that, you can always count somehow on U.S. Soccer on giving things away, right? They don't send them to the Super Bowl to do all that stuff if they're not picking them this summer. That's just not happening, right? So you can always count on who's done what commercial to see who's going to make the team, because this is actually how things work. I mean, obviously, you're not going to pick Roldan to go to the Super Bowl and then leave him home this summer. That's just not going to happen. So you can count on that's one. Pick the other 25 guys you want, right? That's one. But anyway, no, I agree with you that he has all of those qualities, and I think that's a good pick. But having said all that stuff, let's not forget the games have to be played. And he has to continue to play well, like he's done for the last, how many years? 30 years? I don't even know. He's been in Seattle forever. But he has to continue to do what he's doing, and he's going to be in good shape.
Tab, bring us to your number 4 guy. I see you have listed 2 guys at number 4.
I have a category, and this category will be the category of these guys are in, but be careful, right? And one is Diego Luna, and the next one is Miles Robinson. Okay, these are 2 guys that I think if we had to pick 26 today, I'm pretty comfortable in saying that both of those guys are going. Now we need to play, and now we need the 3 months of impressing Mauricio Pochettino so that no one that's playing in Europe will take their spot, right? That's really what it is. Let's not forget that there's a young Banks playing in Europe right now, Nokai Banks, who's doing really well and who likely will take a spot. And let that not be Miles Robinson's spot. I think Miles is in a good spot. I think if he continues to play well for Cincinnati, he will be there. But I think he needs to impress, no question, with his 90-minute games. And by the way, for a team that's, I think, highly competitive and that will be at the top of the East competing for everything. On Luna's side, obviously didn't play the first game. But I think he needs to continue to do what he does, and that's make plays in the final third. If he continues to do that, that is a position where, in particular, now that we haven't seen Gio Reyna, and I don't know how long again, I think that becomes a position that's a little bit more up for grabs. And I think Diego Luna needs to continue to do his job and make things happen in the final third.
Yeah, I want to see him be a little bit sharper in those moments. Miles Robinson was actually my 3rd guy on the list, so I'm going to expand upon the point you made. Really strong 90-minute performance for him this weekend for FC Cincinnati, and not just doing the stuff that Miles Robinson we all know is good at. He is devastating in the open field, running down opposing attackers, and maybe our best center back in the box, just aerially. And that's a really important, like we all know that this past 2 years, set pieces there's been a kind of a revolution in coaching set pieces, and more and more goals coming off of set pieces. So we need guys who are good in the air on that back line. And Miles Robinson is really good at both those things. What we didn't see from him and from Cincinnati last year was real pitch control. using the ball and using your spacing to dictate terms. And we actually saw some of that this weekend. Granted, it was against Atlanta. Atlanta's a bad team, so you don't want to read too much into it. But if Robinson can sort of take some of the chaos out of the game and replace it with control, which I think he did in week 1, that will go a long way, especially, obviously, if it translates to the U.S. national team. And to me, Tab, just intrinsically, a pairing of Robinson and Chris Richards makes a whole hell of a lot of sense for the U.S. if they're both sort of firing on cylinders. Like, those guys seem like natural partners to me.
Yeah, I agree with that. There was one particular play, this weekend in MLS where a ball was sent to Almiron. I think you'll remember the ball. They sent Almiron a little bit of a longer ball, and you see Almiron running full speed, and here comes Miles Robinson at 3/4 speed and stick his arms out and is a lot faster than him. That's sort of, I think, that is a situation that we'll see in the World Cup, in particular in the first round, where the field is going to be opened up. And in an open field, Miles Robinson is hard to beat. Miles has good speed, uses his body well. And I think that was sort of the perfect play it kind of took me into the summer into saying, hey, this could happen against Paraguay, against the same player, right? Or it could happen against others. But for the most part, in the first round, it's likely that we'll have the ball on the opposing side of the field, and our field will be wide open. And I think that's where I'd like to see a player like Miles Robinson.
All right, I started this list with Matt Freese, the guy who we both think will be wearing the number 1 kit. You got a whole list of guys who are desperate to catch him.
I had to pick as almost a category because I do feel like Matt Freese will be a lock, and I do feel like if Turner does well in the spring, I think he will be a lock also. And mostly because I think we just can't throw his experience away. He's coming from playing the last World Cup, and I think that'll be important to the team. Now, when it comes to the number 3, I put a list of Patrick Schulte, Brady, Celentano. And I think all those guys, and I mean, you could potentially throw Stefan in there if you wanted to, but I just think we are looking for a number 3. Don't forget, Klinsmann has been doing really well in Serie B in Italy, playing for Cesena, and I think he's a legitimate contender for the number 3 spot. So I think all 3 of these guys, Schulte, Brady, and Celentano, they have to show. And if there's any position where we need to impress, this is the position. And those guys have to be fighting at this point for me for the 3rd spot on the roster as a goalkeeper. But they definitely have to show this spring.
Are you disappointed that Gaga Slonina isn't in this discussion, given how good he was a few years ago at such a young age for Chicago, and then he makes that big move to Chelsea, and he's kind of dropped off the face of the earth?
Yeah, those moves to Chelsea, they're not always great. We have a lot of history with that. Miazga, there's a bunch of guys who made that move and it didn't necessarily pan out. I am surprised. I'm surprised because, 5, 6, 7 years ago, we thought of him as the next great, right? And he had that potential. Not saying that he couldn't be. Goalkeeping is one of those positions where you can get you get better as you get older, and you can potentially play into your late 30s and play really well into your late 30s. So I do think there's still a chance. I just don't think he put himself in position right now to battle, and that is a disappointment for me.
Yeah, 2 guys who did put themselves in position to battle. One who I think is very clearly in the pool, and one who's a reach. Jack McGlynn for the Houston Dynamo, who has been part of Mauricio Pochettino's camp, has one of the best left foot in the world, man. Like he's in that discussion, non-Leo Messi category anyway. Just absolutely devastating set piece delivery. Played one of the best passes you'll ever see this weekend for Houston's opener. Was playing deeper as a number 8. Has also played as a number 10. Incredible vision. Hits those disguised passes across his hips. Through ball artist. And then there's like a Jack McGlynn clone in San Jose playing for Bruce Arena, named Nico Chakiris, who is a product of the Quakes Academy, who was arguably the best player on the US U20 team this past year. He's wearing the number 10 for the Quakes, had an assist this weekend, was involved in all 3 of their goals. He's a true number 10. McGlynn is in the picture. I understand Shaqiri is a reach, but we have seen this from Mauricio Pochettino before. Young player gets his opportunity, young player impresses, young player gets called into camp. Do either of these guys have a chance for you, Tab?
I'll start by saying no, that they don't. But I'll follow that by saying that I love both of these guys. These are good players. Jack McGlynn, I think he's playing in a better position for himself now. If you recall, he did it, it seemed like for a bunch of years in Philadelphia, playing that sort of withdrawn number 8, but on the left side, right, serving balls. Jack is just such a great player. He's fun to watch. He does everything well. If there was anything that Jack lacks, is getting into the box a little bit more. He's not a guy that gets into the box. He always ends up about 20 yards out. I'd like to see him do that more, but I certainly feel like, I know I started by saying no, they don't have a chance, but I do feel like if he in particular got picked for the national team, it would not necessarily surprise me because he deserves to be there. He's a good player. So Jack being on the field in the World Cup this summer, number 1, would not scare him. And number 2, he belongs. So I'll have to say no, only because of the numbers we have in front of them, but not because he doesn't belong. In terms of Shaqiri's, I agree with you that this summer or last summer in the U20 World Cup, he and Brooklyn Reigns were the best 2 players that we had who were consistent pretty much every game. I think Nico's a little bit more of an attacking player than Jack is. He's a little bit more of a creator. He's a little bit more technical in terms of getting out of tight things and being more of a true 10. I think he's a creator. I think it's a little bit late for him to get on this. But again, I will say that, you have a 26-man roster. Out of the 26 players, it's likely that you will play your whole World Cup with 18 or 17 or 19, right? So maybe you want to add a couple of younger guys in the end to give them that experience. I know I would, and I would not be against, Shaqiri being one of those, because I think he has the talent for that, and he's one of the guys in the next generation coming along. So I agree with both these players that they need to impress, and they will impress because they're good players. I just think that they're a long shot.
Yeah, I think so too. But I felt the need to mention them because they are 2 of my favorite players to watch in MLS. It's nice to see MLS academies producing really classy, sort of almost South American coded attacking players. It reminds me of the Tab Ramos days a little bit. For the longest time, Tab, U.S. soccer fans are going to say, why is Tab the only one we've ever produced who plays like this? And now, as a bit by bit, there seems to be more from your lineage. Like, this is your legacy as a U.S. soccer great, to see players like this coming out of our academies.
Well, I mean, I obviously can't take credit for any of that, but it's nice to hear those things sometimes. I am happy that we do have a bunch of creative players coming along who can make plays out of nothing, and that's encouraging. And certainly the 2 players you just mentioned are this way.
Let's move a little bit deeper into midfield for your next pick.
Yeah, so my last 2 picks, and I'll start with the number 2. Would be Sebastian Berhalter, because I think with the way the central part of midfield is laying out, he's becoming a little bit of a long shot, and he has a shot at this, right? But it goes, part of him having a shot is exactly what this list is about, which is impressing Mauricio Pochettino over the next 3 or 4 months in MLS. And I think he needs to do that. And he needs to do that game in and game out. And by the way, I've never seen the kid take a day off. So it's not like he's not going to. I expect him to do exactly what he's doing and continue to do that. He is a good player. There's a lot of ways in which he can help this national team. And I hope he just has that consistency through the spring that he has always had. But he's certainly one that needs to impress.
All right. And why don't you give us our number one, and then I'll bring us out with my number one pick.
Okay, so I'll go right to the number one. The number one is one that I think is a long shot, but if there's someone who needs to impress, that would be Josh Sargent. I think, as we mentioned, and you started the show by saying, hey, if you're a forward and you score goals, you always have a chance, right? He's a forward and he scores goals, and he will score goals. And I think that he is the number one guy that needs to impress this spring to get into that picture of being one of likely 4 forwards that Mauricio Pochettino is going to pick. I think he has a shot at it. I think it's a long shot, but if there's someone out there that needs to impress, it certainly is Josh Sargent.
Yeah, I feel bad for him because it almost feels like the door was closed on his opportunity last year when he did get into camp and he didn't impress, and Ajiman did, and it almost feels like it's too late. But as you said, as you know, over the past month I've been hosting this show, I've gotten to talk with folks like Marcelo Balboa, Clint Mathis, who knows a thing or two about scoring goals for the national team. If you get hot at the right time in the 2 months leading up to the World Cup, in the 6 months leading up to the World Cup, whatever it is, if you are a consistent goal scorer as a number 9, everybody pays attention to that because that is the job. It's what I was talking about with Ricardo and Pepi before. It's what we're talking about with Josh Sargent. It's what I'm going to talk about with my number one pick, 17-year-old Julian Hall, MLS Player of the Week from match day 1. He had a brace for the Red Bulls down in Orlando. They were the only road team to win this weekend. He was awesome in combo play, and he was, I thought, really polished and patient and smart in front of goal to find those tap-ins that the Red Bulls' patterns of play was creating. The number one skill for a center forward is to find easy chances. If you can do that consistently, then you will keep scoring. We've seen that again and again and again. It translates up. Julian Hall is just 17. Probably not there physically, but if he plays like one of the best center forwards in MLS, is there any reason for Mauricio Pochettino to ignore him? Is there any reason for him to say, oh, this kid, well, he's going to turn 18 next month. Oh, this 18-year-old kid, he's too young. He's not. If he's doing the job, you have to pay attention. Isn't that the rule?
Well, I really like this pick, actually, because as you know, I'm not a stats guy. But I believe he's averaging 2 goals a game in his professional career in First Division. So that's pretty good, right? That will put him up with anyone, right? So, no, I agree with all those things, Matt. I have to say his movement is great. When you talk about, you know, what makes up a great forward, and that is someone who gets in front of goal at the right time. He does that. He combines. He has good feet. And so he has all the tools to be, you know, if we were going to put him into, I would take him back into that securities category where you say, okay, maybe the back of your roster, you have some guys for the future. Obviously, what we have to think about with him at this point is that it's only been 1 game, right? So we have to wait and see what the consistency looks like. But he certainly has an opportunity to impress. And you know, I think he was named the Player of the Week this week. So because of that, the eyes are going to be on him. So he's not going to be a surprise any longer. Teams get to scout him a little bit more. So let's see how he reacts to, you know, people sort of playing his strengths a little bit more, right? Because that obviously happens by other teams. In terms of the physicality, which you mentioned, you know, this always happens with young players until young players are really good. And then at that point, physicality doesn't matter anymore, right? I mean, you know, you got give you a perfect example, Pedri at Barcelona, right? He's the little guy that if you see him at the bakery tomorrow, you would never think this guy is like a world superstar.
The best player in the world. The best player in the world.
Potentially the best player in the world, right? Yeah. And he looks like he should be working in the bakery, actually, instead of going to bake bread. But so the physicality, that's something that I think great players overcome. Because let's not forget defenders are not faster than the ball. So if you and the ball are gone by the time defenders get there, it really doesn't matter how small you are. And I think, young players, eventually the good ones get to that level. But I do like this call. Hall was great the first week, and I think I don't see a reason why he's not going to continue to be great, but let's get with him through his ups and downs, which I think he will inevitably have.
Yeah, well, I guess we'll start a Julian Hall monitor for for the rest of the show for the next couple of months to see if he has any chance of cracking Mauricio Pochettino's 2026 U.S. World Cup roster. It would be quite a story. I think he is pretty clearly the best center forward prospect the U.S. has produced since Ricardo Pepi, maybe even longer than that. It's exciting to see a 17-year-old play as well as he did this week. One of multiple kids on that Red Bull team, by the way, who played excellent ball this weekend. Adrian Mehmedi, the 16-year-old defensive midfielder, arguably even better than Julian Hall in this one. And by the way, he's a dual national. Morocco are all over him. So we have a real dual national panic for the first time in a couple of years. If you are a U.S. men's national team sicko, the Red Bulls are probably your team of choice to start watching this MLS season. And we'll be all over on this show in the coming weeks. And for now, though, it's time for one more break. And we're going to hear from Tab on a pivotal moment in the U.S. national team back in 1995. Thank you all for listening to Inside American Soccer. Please rate, review, and subscribe. Welcome back to Inside American Soccer, where we're going to take you inside the locker room a little over 30 years ago, actually. We talk a lot about the 1994 World Cup on this show. I think everybody talks about that because it was such a seminal moment for soccer in North America. And I think we all see this coming summer through that lens. Hope that 2026 can do for the U.S. And Canada what 1994 did, at least in part. But there also needs to be some thought about what comes next. And the guy I'm with right now, Tab Ramos, was a huge part of what comes next. And really, Tab, you were talking, and it was sort of the professionalization of the game here, starting really in 1995. After all the confetti and all of the, going on Letterman and Leno and whatever else happened for you guys, Snickers commercials, it was a different era starting in 1995. So take us back to that time and what you guys were doing and what it meant.
Yeah, I always have fun going back to these stories, although I feel like I'm telling everyone the bedtime story, and I don't know how many people want to hear it. But here's the important part about this. I've been fortunate enough to have seen sort of the development of the sport over the last 30, 40 years. That's probably the only advantage to being old, because I can't think of anything else. But I can tell you that there's certain moments that I think where I could see the evolution of soccer in this country coming along, right? And one of those moments, obviously, is late 1989 when the team qualifies for the World Cup for the first time in 40 years. And then the next 5 years become, hey, we host the World Cup, and now we're competitive, and now we beat England, and we beat Italy or Brazil, or, you get all these friendly, great results that you're happy about. And then World Cup 94 comes and all the lights are on and everybody's paying attention. And like you said, everyone's going on all the morning shows and everything else that has to do with the publicity of great moments. And then that goes away. And now we find ourselves with the reality of, okay, well, now we got to keep moving the ball forward. How do we do that, right? And so I look back in 1995 as a pivotal moment, because I think although 94 was great, I think it was the culmination of the beginning of soccer being back on the map, right? It was 89 through 94, and it was great, and it was exciting. And now we need to play with the big boys. And now we need to play with the big boys for real. Now it's not just showing up and being the underdog and showing everybody that, U.S. plays soccer. Now we need to become competitive. And I think 1995 was the year where that started to happen. and that's U.S. Soccer, selected to go to Copa America, which they don't always participate in. We've only been to, 4 or 5 in the history, right? We don't go every time. That was only, I think, the second time that U.S. had participated in a Copa America, so it wasn't happening. And we go, the Copa America's in Uruguay, 1995, and we go there, and the first thing that happened when we got there is we had a players' strike. We decided that we had been hearing about, hey, there's hundreds of millions that this World Cup left, and like player unions, players unions usually do is they try to say, well, what's in it for the players? Because at the end of the day, we're the ones on the field, right? And we sort of need to get compensated for that as well. So we went into the Chile game. We started the Copa America that year by playing Chile the first game, but we didn't practice before that game because we were on strike. So we were in Copa America, didn't go to practice, and actually played the game and beat Chile in the first game. But it was the first time where we had negotiations with the federation, where we just basically said, if we don't get X, Y, and Z, then we're not playing. And at that point, there comes the negotiations. Of course, agents are always involved because they're always involved in this stuff. I would say to make things worse, but let's just keep that between us. And it became a negotiation. Obviously, we all agreed to move forward, and we played in that Copa America. And not only did we play in it, but then we showed that we really could compete, because if 1994 can always be chalked up to, yeah, you played some good teams and you knocked out, Colombia, which was a great opponent, but at the end of the day, it was the underdog, getting the big result. I think Copa America now became, hey, we have our feet on the ground and we know we can play, and we have a full professional squad with players playing everywhere, and now we need to compete toe-to-toe with big countries in South America. And we went down there, beat Chile the first game, lost to Bolivia second game, but then beat Argentina the third game in one of the great victories of U.S. soccer, 3-0, took first place in the group and ended up in fourth place. We lost to Brazil later on in the tournament and ended up in fourth place. But also, so that was the beginning of us being, okay, here we are really competitive. But there was another side to it that I think was the birth of the truly good young players coming along, right? It was the first time we got to see like a Claudio Reyna and his skill set and what he had to offer. And for all of us having been on the national team, let's not forget there's a little generation of players of, myself and Eric Winalda, Marcelo Balboa, and maybe, well, I think Tony wasn't on the team by then already, but those guys, we had been together since like 1988. So it had been 7-8 years of being on the national team. So that's sort of a long time. And now we started to see these young players like Claudio, we were really impressed by, because they had all the tools. We saw Jovan Karofsky all of a sudden sign at Manchester United, and he was on their youth team, and he was coming along. So I think 1995, if 1994 became the birth of, let's say, soccer fans following the team, 1995 became the birth of what we now know, all of our players starting to go overseas and seeing. That's when we started to see players like obviously Claudio, I mentioned, Jovan Karofsky, who was great, and Brad Friedel, who came along to the national team and then became, think about it, who can match Brad Friedel's career? I don't think anyone can in U.S. soccer yet, with what he did in the EPL. So I think in a bunch of different ways, it became a sort of a professional national team for the first time.
So let's make an analogy then, right? So if the 2026 version of what you guys did in 1994, now you guys made it out of the group in 1994. People didn't expect you to. Played really well against Brazil in that round of 16. Brazil obviously went on to win, but it was a brave and gutty performance from you guys. Won a lot of respect. The 2026 version of that for the U.S. men's national team would be what? Making it all the way back to the quarterfinals, going up against a Brazil or an Argentina, maybe even making it to the semifinals and laying down a marker and saying, okay, this is where we are now. This is what we can do when the stars align and everything is clicking. This is who we are as a national team. Then the 2027 version of that, the step forward professionally for the national team that you guys experienced and really drove in 1995, what would that be for the U.S. in 2026 and 2027 and 2028 and beyond? Like, what, from your perspective, needs to happen for the U.S. to make that next professional jump?
Well, I think now we're at a point where, we have a great team. We're no longer the underdog at the World Cup, which is already a big task to go there as favorites to win our group and to advance, let's say at the very least a round of 16 that's assumed by everyone at this point, right? Because if we were not to do that, that means that we likely lost to teams we were not supposed to lose to. So it's a more difficult situation to be in. But now, to answer your question, I've picked some moments of evolution of the game. So what would be the next moment of evolution? And I think now, for us, I think we can put ourselves in this World Cup by potentially participating in a quarterfinal or in a semifinal where we can cement sort of the competitiveness of our program, number one, worldwide, because I think we already have a lot of respect worldwide from other countries. I don't think there's a country out there right now that can say, hey, we play the U.S., this is going to be an easy game. There isn't a single one. And you can pick France, you can pick England, you can pick Brazil or Argentina or anyone. They know that they're in for a battle, that they have to give their best. Can they win? Yeah, of course. There's a good chance that those teams will beat us, but they will only beat us at their best. It's unlikely that they will beat us with anything else. So that's a good place to be. But I think, Matt, if I were to say the evolution in our next battle, I think the next battle is more at home. Our next battle is, how do we become a bigger sport in our home? And I think that's the toughest obstacle at this point, because as you continue to see the numbers and you continue to see MLS grow and you continue to see our players doing better and our players being more competitive overseas, how are we making that shortcut? And I do see the numbers that obviously you read as well. But it's hard for me to believe now when I look at the NFL and I look at, Major League Baseball and I look at the NBA and then I look, are we more popular than golf? Are we really? I don't think we are. Are we more popular than college football, college basketball? You can name 7 or 8 sports that you can legitimately go to a bar and say, those sports are a lot more popular than soccer. Those sports are what people talk about. So I think our next evolution has to be, how do we get to become one of those?
And if you have the answer to that, you might be the next MLS commissioner, because I think the guys in charge, they've been looking for that answer for a long time. Obviously, a ton of progress with the league, a long way to go. I think the key word is culture. Culture wins on every level in every sport. If your country has a good culture, look, Tab is Uruguayan, and in terms of culture, everybody asks, how does Uruguay punch above their weight so consistently for such a small country? It's because of the culture of soccer. It gave us one of our greatest players of all time. It gives us one of the favorites to watch in the World Cup every 4 years, and it gave us a great talk today on this show. So thank you all for joining me and Tab on this episode of Inside American Soccer. We will be back next week. I'll still be hosting. We will give you an update on young Theo Bogert's progress on the forecheck, if he has started beating Tom in the head with that hockey stick that he is trying desperately to master already. So thank you for joining us, and don't forget to like, rate, subscribe, do all the things on all the socials, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. And thank you for joining us, folks. We will see you next week.